Hello, my name is Criss. I'm out of Lapine, Oregon, which is in the central part of the state, about 30 miles south of Bend. I'm going to tie for you today a pattern I call a bleeding minnow. The minnow pattern I've had for a while, but the little blood trails that we're going to put in it came out of an experience I had on a little lake we call Hosmer, where pretty aggressive brook trout, and it's just something that I added to the fly, which made it a little better. I didn't get any more fish on it, but I did get the strikes were a little different. The brook trout there would trail a normal streamer or even trail my minnow pattern. But when I put the little blood trail that we're going to add to this, it seemed to be the strike was more. There was no hesitation. It was more of a slam, even almost like like taking a bass. They would come right out of the weed lines, and I fished this parallel to the weeds on either a dry line with about a 12-foot leader or on an intermediate sinking line. I like intermediate sinking lines because I can fish any level of the water. I can judge the depth rather than the thing just sinking fast, and it just helps, I think, in the presentation. I'm going to leave the tag into the thread a little long here because I'm going to show you a little trick for trapping lead. We're going to use flat lead on this one, and it's just out of old wine cork sealing stuff, so I happen to have a lot of it, so no use me buying a bunch of new flat lead. I don't need it. I got a lot of wine. Not that I drink a lot of it, but you know, we got it here. So I'm just going to put a level one wrap of it. I'm going to bring my thread forward, my tying thread, and I'm using a 14-aught shear. I like this shear thread. It seems to flatten out and lay down very nice. And I can control it real well. So I'm going to bring the thread forward. Now I'm going to bring back that little tag line. I'm going to hold a straight line on the back side. I'm going to take 2 wraps like that. Then I'm going to take around the thread around the back side, and then I'm going to come over it. And what I'm doing is, instead of, if I had round lead here, the thread sinking into the wraps, what I've done is I got to bind a thread here, and then I'm putting thread over the top, and it just locks that lead right in. Although, you know, I don't have that problem on the thread, on the flat lead. It does work real well on the round lead, and I have a chance to show that little process, so I thought I'd do that. Okay, we're going to use Arctic foxtail. This fly can also be tied in marabou, but I'm going to tie it today in Arctic fox. And we're going to take a little gray, because most of the time the tail of a little minnow is gray. And again, if you get into this pattern, you don't have to have Arctic fox, you don't have to have the exact colors. It's more of this fly, what I'm going to show you is basically a proportion and explain how to build a minnow pattern. However you want to build yours, you can. I'm just telling you that when I get done with the proportions out of this, that's where the minnow is going to come out of, and you'll understand that you can tie just about any color you want. It makes no difference. His blood trails are something we'll talk about. So we're going to put a little tail, and it's just a little short tail, about half the shank length. We're going to pinch it right behind the lead. Going to bind it down, a couple of wraps. I'm going to take a wrap underneath and pull up on it. That'll keep it up and stop it from folding down on me. I'm going to take my thread forward, just some big wraps, up to the front. Now you see that I left some nice space up here. It's important to do that so we don't crowd everything at the end. Excuse me. So we're going to flatten out that material, and we're just going to wrap it forward, and we're going to build myself a nice base for our mylar material that we're going to use for basically the body. Now I call it a body, but it really isn't. When we get done with this, the color that we add on this body is going to be the lateral line of a minnow. And those of you that know what the lateral line in a fish or in fish biology is the center, right down the center of the body. And so we're going to build a colored lateral line. And again, in this fly, the body color is whatever you want to call, whatever works for you in your mylar. I'm going to use kind of a multicolored one here right now that seems to work pretty darn well. I use a pearl one also, and I can take a Pantone pen and I can mark right along the lateral line right at this area here. Just you can color that with purple or blue or even give it a little red, orange tint. It's more of what color your minnow is. Again, when we get done with this, you're going to see this fly, the bulk of the fly is going to be the Arctic fox. This lateral line is going to be just that body color. So now we're going to come in, we're going to put it full length so we keep that body nice and smooth when we wrap everything on it. You take it back to the back, hook bend, bring it forward again, remembering that you're going to tie some bunch of stuff up in front there. Now I find if I take this and jiggle this like this, that you won't get that little fold or little bellowing buckle there at the back when you tie in tinsel or any of this mylar material. I'm going to put it in kind of just touching wraps, not really overlapping. Get up to the front, just going to go over, pull it tight, take a couple of hard wraps, and trim it off. Now I'm going to trim it off, and I take my fingernail, I'm going to flare out that material just a little bit so that when my next couple of wraps that go over it, we'll lay it down. I'm going to try all my might not to get a blunt end right here. Otherwise you get a blunt end like this and the thread will keep dropping off. And then when I tie in this upper body material, it'll hang in the air like that and you'll get this weird shape. We don't want that. We want this stuff to kind of lay real nice, and you'll see when we get there. Now, the white that we're going to use, again, it's Arctic fox. And we're going to build a little belly in this. Now, most of the minnows, you'll have a cream to a tan to a white. And we're going to put a white belly in this one. I'm going to take the material in it, and you see that I'm stroking it down. And if I put a twist like that, and I take and I cut all the way to the bottom, I cut all the length out of there. You don't want to cut short and you're taking fur off of a hide. You want to cut it as close to the hide as possible. Then I'm going to crinkle it in my hand a little bit, and I'm going to stroke it out, take the fur out just like we did when they did the tail. I saved that material for dubbing. It's all good. Now, you see I have some kind of wild tips there. I can only tell you that this is from practice, is I know where the tips are in my fingers. So when I put it back, I know that they're pretty much aligned. I'm not after perfect alignment like you would stack it. You can't stack this in a hair stacker. But I'm not after perfect alignment. I just want to get some of the wild, crazy ones out of there and line things up. Now, one of the keys to this, and this is not a streamer, so I don't want this coming back over the tail because that's not my minnow. This is just a body color, so I just want it just coming back just about what I call the root of the tail, which is right there. I just want the tips or a little bit of it coming back so the colors kind of blend as we go in. Now this is the belly, so we're going to put it in the bottom, but the same thing applies. I don't want the tips going too much past the root. Now we're just going to have all that hanging out there. I'm going to take a little soft pinch, 1, 2, 3 wraps, and now I'm going to roll it over, get a little tighter here. I'm going to roll it over, and I'm going to pinch down like this. And what I'm going to do is I'm rolling the material. So rather than, if this is a hook like this, rather than having everything sit here, I'm rolling it up the sides just a little bit so it gets right in line with that lateral line. Okay, so I got a couple of nice hard wraps in there now. Now I'm going to come in here, I'm going to reach in here, and without cutting, you see my fingers getting the thread out of the way. I'm going to reach in here and kind of do a stagger cut. So that, again, I want this thing to stay coned. I don't want to have a big abrupt end if I can get away from it. So we stay in pretty tapered up here in the front. Pinch it down when it doesn't go down. Material's not going to bite you. You can handle it. Okay, so now we have the belly, and you see it just kind of just goes back just about to the root. So now we're going to go back to the gray, and we're going to put a little gray here on top. I have put some flash up there if you want to put a little flash up there, but you don't need it. So again, we're going to stroke some back. We're going to twist the hide, twist the fur, go in and cut as close to the hide as we can, cut it out of there. Again, we're going to roll it in my fingertips, pinch it, put my fingernail. If you can't get enough pressure or anytime you're cleaning anything, if you take your finger and take and push that finger on top of that fingernail, you have a vise. And I'm telling you, nothing will move. It's amazing how strong your finger. If you think your fingers are a little weak and you can't pinch something like that, that's all you have to do. If you get a little knot, just cut right through it. Again, we're not trying to make classic salmon flies here today. We're just trying to try a trout fly. Now, I have that little fan shape, so if I pinch that fan, I can open the tips up here and clean out anything up there in that end. So again, I'm going to take and I'm going to line the tips. I'm putting it down in an area where I can see. These are in pretty good shape. Got out the longer ones. Now again, I don't want it reaching all the way back to the back of the tail. I'm just going to creep it just about, and you want this first one just to really get just about to the root. Now, when I measure, I'm going to take these fingertips and I'm going to pinch it right about where I want my tie-in point. So I have that measurement. Now, if I go this side and I put these fingertips together and I pinch it, then I come up here and I cut. I'm going to make a cut down here. I'll show you the cut here because I got to get it down where I can see it. You see that I cut off the ends. And the reason is if I was to tie that big mess in and try to cut it off like I did the white here, the belly, I'll crowd the head and everything else. I'll just have a big mess up there that I can't control. Where if I cut it first, I can. Now I'm just going to take a standard thin lacquer, get a little drop on it, and then I'm just going to put it right on the ends of those tips. Just a little dab. I'm going to wait just a couple of seconds. And I'm going to lay it there, and I'm going to lay the thread right over the top, nice soft, and I'm going to start pinching it down. Come with a soft wrap, kind of get it in place, and then you're going to drive it home with some really nice hard wraps. Now I'm pinching this right here with all I have, and I'm giving a little up pressure like this. I'm trying to pull in the material up so it cannot roll on me. I want to control it. I had a great mentor in Andy Puglions, and Andy used to say that you just don't take anything from your materials. You are the master of your materials. And as soon as they get smarter than us, we might as well quit. Now you can see that right here, that material went right down to the edge of the white. So I've got a little V, one material here, one material in here, and it's getting a nice little V, so it's getting a nice little blend right there. Okay, so that's one. Your head is taking shape. Again, we don't need a small head for this. This is not a presentation fly. The head on this is going to be a head of a minnow. I have people that put yellow dots and put black marker in it and make eyes on them. When you get up to size 2 and 4, you can do that pretty readily. You can even glue some eyes on it. This is a check, a streamer hook that I use here. See, I believe this is a 10. It can be tied all the way down to 12s. I tie this. And again, it can be any kind of a streamer hook. It can be a 200R. It doesn't matter. So now we're going to put an olive on top. The top can either be fine olive, dark gray, or black, depending on what you have in your waters. Again, this fly, we're not trying to build an exact pattern. It's more of this is how I build a minnow, and the reason I build the minnow this way is because I get the proportions I want and the look I want. And again, when you're playing with flies and you're doing your own experimentation, try to come up with that. There's a lot of tyers that say, boy, you need this and this from Timbuktu to be able to tie a fly. I find that a little annoying sometimes. The fish don't know whether it came from Timbuktu or not. They just know whether it's proportion, size, and color. That's what they're interested in. So now I'm going to line up those tips again as best I can. That looks pretty good. Now this, I want it to cruise just a hair past that gray that I put in on top. So we're going to get a blend, so it'll blend right back down to the tail. Again, we don't want it hanging past the tail. We want it just at the root. So again, I'm going to do that measurement trick. I'm going to pinch. I'm going to pinch it hard. I'm going to come down here low where I can see and make a good cut. Again, you see I got a nice flat cut there. I'm going to come in, put a dab of head cement, kind of want. And if you don't sit for, if you go on too fast, what happens is the head cement will crawl up towards your fingers, and it'll make that stick a little bit right there. So that's why I'm taking my time. So again, I'll put a little soft wrap. 1, 2. Kind of coax that down to the head there a little bit so I don't have to fill too much. And then we'll come back up here on top and squeeze. Hold it just like we did before, squeezing hard, holding it on top, and building a nice head up here. We're going to have a little blunt head in there, but it's not going to hurt anything. It doesn't change how it fishes, okay? So we're going to lace and wraps the thread. Okay, so now we're going to wind the thread. We're getting pretty cord here. Okay, so now I'm going to fingernail that around. Go down the sides a little bit. There, I kind of like that. That works. Okay, come back up in here. We're going to fill in all around. Make sure it's all gray. Okay. Now, for the fun part. This is they call it an ice floral material. I used red floss in the beginning. I can say don't use a real heavy material. You want the finest red material you can, and you want it red. And I'm only going to take 3 fibers because it doesn't take much to do this. So I'm going to take 3 fibers out of here. 1, 2. There we go. I'm just going to cut it out. Now I have starting my thread right now. My thread is, got a wild hair here. My thread is all the way back against the last tie-in point. So that's where I'm going to start. I'm going to double the material in half, like so, and I'm just going to take a loop with a little gap in front of the thread, just about the center of the head. You can see it's just about the center. I'm going to take a wrap now, and I'm going to do what I'm going to call 1 o'clock. I'm going to take the thread up at that angle. So I'm going to go like this, up at an angle. And then I'm going to come back straight. As I come back straight, I'm going to pull the 2 pieces down the side. This keeps me from having to do some crazy manipulation of trying to tie in this thin material down each side. Putting in a piece and tie it in, and putting a piece and tying in. That not only a waste of time, it can really be a hassle with stuff this fine. And I'm going to drag those down till they're just about even with what I'd call the gill area of the fly. Roll over, make sure you're there. Got one that came out a little low there, but that won't hurt. It's coming out of the low area. That one kind of broke on me, but it's okay. Again, it's just a trail. It's kind of a simulation. Now, I only want these about twice the length of the fish. Something like this, and it doesn't have to be an even cut. I kind of jiggle the scissors like that, and whatever comes off, comes off. I'm going to put a little whip finish on this. I'm not going to lacquer it. Normally I would lacquer this up, but I want to show you this. I'm going to do a double whip on this. Some of the threads today are real slick, and sometimes just a single whip finish does not hold things. So sometimes a double whip with 3 wraps each is stronger and better than a whip finish with 6 wraps. So I'm just going to slide my thread in, cut it off. Now, that doesn't look too bad, but it doesn't look much like a fish. Doesn't look much like a minnow. And I happen to be a tyer that's not afraid of water, because that's where they live. So we're going to wet this little critter. And you'll see that's what we get. You see there's a little, little flat little belly here, and then that's usually, in a minnow. You can see the lateral line color coming through. And if I was to take a little more water out of that and smooth it back a little bit like it was swimming in the water, you can see that's pretty darn close. And like I said, I don't get any more fish, but the takes are definitely more dramatic. And that's the bleeding minnow.